Welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Knowledge Exchange with Wyoming and Colorado. We're happy to be here today, and I think we're just gonna go ahead and get started since it's 12 and we have a pretty packed panel. So this is the second webinar of our series. I'm Guinevere Nelson, and I'm with Colorado State University, and I'll be your moderator today. This webinar series is a partnership between us, the Colorado Office of Outdoor Recreation, the University of Wyoming Extension, the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation, Tourism and Hospitality Initiative, and the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Office. We're working together to enhance outdoor recreation across our states. And I wanted to introduce Haley, who's on the screen. She's my co-host and co-creator of this series, and she'll be your moderator today. And she'll monitor the chat, which you should be able to see has a little question mark in a box. You hit that, you type your question, and she will help you out with answers, or she'll just pass them along for the Q&A at the end. She'll also put a poll link in the chat today because we have some questions for you that we'd like to get some information about. And yeah, so that's kind of some stuff there. Did you want to say anything, Haley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone joining us today. Even with the big Colorado-Wyoming border war football game tomorrow, for those joining from other states, you might not know, but this is a very big rivalry, a very big deal around here. So we appreciate your time in this, though we won't judge you if you're already wearing your team colors today. Either way, thank you for being here. I see Guinevere is, but thank you for being here, even if tomorrow we are cheering for opposite sides. So we hope that you enjoy this panel today. And yes, please utilize the chat or the Q&A function throughout the panel.
Thanks, Haley. Today's topic is public-private partnerships, and we're really curious about this because 45% or more of each of our states is made up of public land. And we know that the bulk of recreation happens in those spaces. So we think these are important. This is an important partnership to explore for users as well as land managers, because we know you guys have a ton of acreage to manage with very few staff. And then we hope today will shed light on successes, strategies, tools, and other ideas to leverage these partnerships for all goals of outdoor recreation and public land management. I'm going to share my screen here, hopefully. Is it in power or sharing mode or presentation mode?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Give it a second. No, you might have to reshare your screen.
All right. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Great. Okay. So there we already introduced that. I wanted to just share with you the agenda today. Let's see if it's doing it. Okay, we're going to do some welcomes, which is where we're at now. A polling question, because we're also excited to learn from you attendees. And then panelist presentations. We have 4 of them today. And then we'll ask a question in between those. And then about the last 20 minutes of the presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A. You guys submitted some questions with your registration, and we have those, as well as whatever Haley collects. We'll try to get to all of those throughout the presentation. Here is a QR code link for you if you haven't registered for the remaining webinars that we have. Please go ahead and join us. We have some on the 12th, looking at December 12th, getting your outdoor recreation idea to fruition. Some lessons learned on January 13th. And then on February 13th, we will explore the future of outdoor recreation and making it a resilient part of our states. Today, our presenters are Jared Oakleaf from the Bureau of Land Management, Doozie Martin from the Friends of the Dillion Ranger District, Nicole Foss from Common Outdoor Ground, and Chuck Sullivan from the Wright. This is our first polling question. And this is through Mentimeter, so you can either take a QR code snapshot of this, or Haley will put the link in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes. Jared, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can do that while people are answering the poll.
You bet.
So this is Jared Oakleaf, and he is the outdoor recreation planner for the Bureau of Land Management in Wyoming.
And you'll just let me know when we're ready, I presume?
Yeah, it's still
Great.
in, can hit F5, it should go into presenter mode maybe, so we can see the whole presentation.
F5?
Should be.
That doesn't seem to be working.
Perhaps the little icon down at the bottom next to the Zoom. It's kind of like just left of the Zoom.
Let's try that.
Okay.
Did that work?
Might have to stop sharing and then reshare.
Okay. How's that?
You can just go ahead and move forward with that.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, as Guinevere said, I'm Jared Oakleaf. I'm an outdoor recreation planner here in the BLM Lander Field Office in Central Wyoming. Just a few quick highlights of some of the partnerships that I work with here is one place in particular is Johnny Behind the Rocks non-motorized trail area, which is a very important area to our community. The trails have a lot of interest from equestrian users to mountain bikers to trail runners, the whole gamut of non-motorized trail users. And I've really been forged. My career and my philosophies on partnerships and managing recreation have been forged through that and other partnerships. Another partnership I'll highlight is we have an active partnership with the Church of Latter-day Saints managing the Mormon Trail through the field office. And we have visitor counts in the sites associated with that historic trail that exceed 100,000 visitors a year. And we actively count on those partners to help us intensively manage those visitors to the sites and ensure that we meet our kind of sometimes contrasting mandate that Congress has put on us with those national trails to provide for outdoor recreation and enjoyment of those trails while also protecting the historic nature of it. So that's just a little bit on me. And this picture is actually from Johnny Behind the Rocks, a trail crew, volunteer trail crew building a trail that's called Johnny on Top, which is one thing we're working on as partners is coming up with more names that don't involve Johnny at Johnny Behind the Rocks. Some of you may have seen this graph, but I think this is a very important graph because you can't talk about managing recreation without also talking about funding. This is very interesting. I think it was Guinevere mentioned that there's 640 million acres of public lands in the United States, and the BLM actually manages the majority of those. And what you see here is that while visits have gone way up in over the last few years, our funding hasn't followed suit. Our per visit funding has actually remained pretty stagnant. So the funding windfalls to the agency, they aren't coming with the visits. So we really have to count on partnerships. And I'll underscore that a little bit more. when I talk about discretionary funding, I talk about funding that isn't appropriated yearly. It's something we can count on year in and year out to fund projects. And that's that money that we have after we do required maintenance and monitoring. So this fiscal year, we'll have about $20,000 in that account to do projects.
Hey,
And
Jared.
just,
Sorry, real
yes.
quick. Can you advance your slide? We're not able to see the graph.
Geez. You haven't seen the graph?
No.
I'm showing as it's advancing.
You
Let's
just-
try this. Advancing now?
No.
No?
There. Yep. Thank you. Got it.
Now you're seeing the graph?
Yep.
Is it in present mode or like just
We
the
can see
working mode?
it's not in present mode.
I guess I can just go through it that way if that
Sure.
works. Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, back to this graph. Here's the graph that I was speaking to earlier. As you can see in the kind of off red orange line, that's what our per visit funding has looked like since 2012. And then in the gray is our visits per year. So you can see the massive uptick in visits and responsibility, but that isn't equating in to more funding. And it's likely not to equate to more funding. Underscoring that further, and speaking about those discretionary funds, we have about $20,000 of discretionary funds a year to go to projects. And for some context, and these are old estimates, but mechanical trail construction cost up to $26,000 a mile. Trail constructed by hand can cost $52,000. And of course, switchbacks are expensive, $1,000 a switchback. Point being there is we have to count on partnerships as an agency. And we've been really lucky. I mentioned the Johnny Behind the Rocks Trail Partnership. Since 2010, our partners have contributed over $1.5 million in labor and dollar matching to that site. And so we've been extremely fortunate. Our agency was fortunate enough, our recreation program in the agency specifically was fortunate enough to bear witness to our sister agency, specifically the United States Forest Service, who had a lot of legacy infrastructure. And a lot of that legacy infrastructure was built on an old, outdated visitor service model where the land manager was the sole source provider of the visitor services. And what we've learned over time, and I think the Forest Service has too, is that when the agencies are the sole provider of visitor services, those services are susceptible to the winds of change, the bureaucratic winds of change, right? And so we really found that that model of the past produced some unstable visitor services, and that equates to unsatisfied visitors. So we've moved this model to something that embraces partnerships. And so you look at this, the analogy is a three-legged bar stool. And so you have the land manager being part of the support structure of those services, but the land manager's job engages nonprofit organization partners and our community to ensure those visitor services are stable and can be maintained through whatever winds of change may come as administrations change or priorities change. And the key of it all is to involve communities in all stages of visitor services, from planning to the end stage of maintenance. Now we have some, this has been further codified most recently in our newest blueprint 21st century strategy for outdoor recreation that the Bureau produced in late August of 2023. That strategy had 4 pillars. Obviously, the one that is most important and germane to this discussion is prioritize and embrace partnerships. However, I would emphasize that partners and partnerships are such a important tool to providing visitor services. That word's used 94 times in the 28-page document, which hints at its importance in how we deliver visitor services as an agency and how we meet community demand. Generally speaking, that's details from the document, the how of how we're going to prioritize and embrace partnership, what's on the screen there. I'd like to highlight the desired outcomes and core strategies. Obviously, we're going to prioritize opportunities for shared stewardship and improved management. We're also going to ensure a diversity of visitors will experience BLM lands broadly across many locations and places. Core strategy there is improve partnerships, not just with nonprofits and advocacy groups for a certain activity, but also local, state, and tribal nation governments. And then we want to make sure that we enhance community engagement. Another tool that I would like to emphasize is the agency's engaging with communities in public land stewardship toolkit. It's a fantastic resource, both for land management agencies, not just within the Bureau, but also I find it very useful to communicating with potential partners so that they understand some of the inner machinations of the agency. So this toolkit is very helpful. It includes success factors, frequently asked questions, some guides, and some templates. I want to, and I guess I would, from my experience, highlight a few things that I think make partnerships work. The first part is, I think potential partners should understand and take some time to communicate with agencies, not just where their priorities are at this national level of which I've emphasized, but also agencies have land use plans. BLM calls them resource management plans. And in those, we highlight priority areas where we're going to emphasize certain types of recreation and where we're going to provide more developed recreation and just the diversity of opportunities. That land use plan is a great place to start in conversations about potential partnerships. We as an agency can't engage in a partnership that doesn't support that land use plan. So that's a good early, often communication thing that helps to establish sideboards. I think the other part that is equally important on the flip side of that is I think as land managers, we far too often get in a framework of thinking that we know best what for said community. And I think as land managers, the challenge and where we're moving to is to engage more with communities to see what their desired outcomes are for the public land, so that we bake into the cake the idea of planning to engage our community at every step of the process. And so we're engaging them in work that's meaningful to them, as opposed to cleaning up trash. That seems to be the standard partnership activity. But as agency personnel and land managers, we need to engage in a bigger way with our communities. So with that, I just pull this Teddy Roosevelt quote that far and away the best prize that life has to offer is a chance to work hard at work worth doing. And I think that goes both ways. To the volunteer who give the greatest compliment to the agency to volunteer to do their paid job, and to the agency, we as agency administrators, we get a great opportunity to engage with our community and empower them to help us with the stewardship of the land that is inherently theirs. So thank you. I'll yield to questions.
Great, thanks, Jared. I think in the polling questions that we got, it was a lot of like, how do we engage with public land managers? What are best strategies for creating partnerships? And even one about how to work with concessionaires on public lands. I think the resources that you provided are those mostly on the BLM website that people could start with. Great.
Yeah, yep, those are available on the BLM website, and I could dig up a link and provide those links in the chat as we go along.
That would be great. Thank you. And aside from what would you think is the best opportunity to engage with either your office or BLM at large? Is it to come to meetings, or how would they take that first step?
I'll speak to that from a personal perspective.
Okay.
I really enjoy when people just drop in and come into the office and we start having a conversation about partnerships and where we can make that happen. And I mean, we're public servants. We work for you guys, and so I would hope that other agency personnel would be open. And I think that's the best start, is just start building those over coffee relationships. And and that goes both ways. Like, we should build that relationship before we're seeking something from each other. And I know that's easy to do because, or easy to say, not to do, because we're all very busy. But if we just take time to build relationships, we can find some common understanding and works towards some common outcomes.
I don't know who doesn't like having a hot beverage with somebody else. So that's great, great solution there. Thanks, Jared. I appreciate your time. And I am just going to share my screen. And we're going to move on to the next poll. Let's see. Haley, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. Let's see. Let's do this again. Great. Now we're at the beginning. Hang on. Okay, the second polling question is, what challenges or successful approaches have you used to create these public-private partnerships? And while you do that and answer that either with the QR code or the link that Haley put in the chat, we're going to move on to Doozie Martin, our next presenter, and he's the executive director for the Friends of the Dillion Ranger District here in Colorado.
All right, thanks, Guinevere. Shall I give that a minute, or are we just going to keep rolling?
Yeah, just keep rolling. It usually takes a minute or two to share your screen and stuff, so people can have some time.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, a lot of what Jared said really resonated with me, and I'm kind of coming at it from the other side of the thing as a partner to a federal agency. So again, my name is Doozie Martin. I'm the executive director for Friends of the Dillion Ranger District. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, been in existence for 20 years. The Dillion Ranger District serves Summit County, which is one county in Colorado. I am sitting in Silverthorne, Colorado, about an hour and a half west of Denver, up in the Rocky Mountains. For some perspective, we're sort of in between the towns of Breckenridge and Vail, Colorado, if you've heard of them. So a lot of recreation takes place here. So I a little less prepared than Jared, but I just have a slideshow that we put on for volunteers at the end of our season. So I'm just going to share that. It'll give you guys some perspective of kind of what our organization is all about. So let me see if I can get that rolling. Awesome. So I will just kind of start on this slide right here. Oops. So 1,900 volunteers, a little over 9,000 volunteer hours, worth about $250,000 at the rate of $31.51 per hour for a volunteer. So who we are, we have 4 full-time year-round employees and 2 seasonal employees. Like we said, we had almost 2,000 volunteers come out to our projects and programs in 2024. You'll see some of these things going on the slideshow, National Trails Day, things like that. So we had about 60 projects. And led about 20 to 25 free educational hikes open to the public. So that's on wildfire, wildlife, edible plants, mushrooms, stream ecology, whatever it may be. So we enlist the help of retired professors or just interested folks in our community to help lead those. So our field project is kind of broken down into two different categories. We have our field, our forest health projects are things like native seed collecting, invasive weed removal, forest monitoring, fish shocking for watershed health analysis, wildlife habitat restoration, buck and rail fence building, boreal toad surveys. And then the other side is trails. So building trails, maintaining trails, building structures, things along those lines. So that's kind of one leg of our organization. The second one is education. So we are very much driven to educate our community. We have programs like Ski with a Ranger. We partner with the local ski resorts to give on-hill interpretive tours. We have Hike with a Ranger, do the same thing in the summer at those resorts. Then we have speaker series and things like that. So part of our mission is to educate our community. And then finally, youth. We have a big youth component as well. So we have a whole staff member devoted to the education and youth component. So we had about 500 local youth. And just to put it into perspective, with 2,000 volunteers throughout the year, our whole community is about 35,000 people. So 4 townships. We feel like we can do a lot with a little. So clearly we get massive visitation around here. So the White River National Forest is the most visited forest in the country and receives more visitation than Rocky Mountain National Park, Grand Canyon, and Yellowstone combined. So we're getting 9 to 10 million visitors per year. And as Jared outlined in his presentation, a lot of people coming here with kind of a fairly similar amount of resources. I'm not going to get into the some of the challenges that our main partner, the U.S. Forest Services, are having. I'm sure many of you are familiar. I know some of you are actually work for the agency. So that's a story for another day, but we're looking at 25 to see how we can help fill some gaps there. So from how do we pull this all together? So our funding is really a 3-legged stool. We hold fundraising events. Maybe saw some slides on our casino night, things like that. I write 12 to 15 grants per year to fund different projects and programs that we have. And then finally, individual donations and memberships are a big part of how we fund what we're doing. So kind of more applicable to our projects, what we have going on today. So we're completely driven by partnerships. Obviously, our #1 partner is the U.S. Forest Service. So our staff works with the specialists in this building on the districts to best understand the greatest needs of the agency. What our staff then does is balances sort of personal interests, the different user groups within our community, and the trying to align project work that both appeals to as many people in our community as possible, but also addresses some of the greatest needs of the agency, whether that's data collection out in the forest or in watersheds, fish shocking, or just straight trail maintenance and bringing groups out to do that. So we worked with over 40 different local and regional partners to put this work on. But again, it's overseen by the specialists of the Forest Service. So, so our partnerships are with schools, with businesses, with corporations, churches, synagogues, other nonprofit organizations, social groups, corporations, youth groups. But again, our main partner is the U.S. Forest Service, and our office is actually resident here in the Dillon Ranger District office in Silverthorne, Colorado. So we are on a daily basis interacting with the specialists here to best understand the needs of our community. In Summit County alone, 80% of the land is national forest. We are also lucky in that we live in a place where people very much value their public lands. Almost everybody lives in this area because of a recreational pursuit or just for the aesthetic beauty that that this area has to offer. So so it's kind of our job to merge the community with the agency, and we're able to sort of funnel interest in the community to help out. The agency is then able to kind of just funnel that to us, as we've kind of got a lot of procedures and in place to develop these partnerships and allow people who are invested in their public lands to remain part of the upkeep. So kind of a pride and ownership element, as these lands do belong to us. So yeah, I don't think I'll go too much deeper on that. I'll leave it open to questions and let the other presenters carry on. But thanks for the attention, guys, and hopefully we can we can address some issues, questions, concerns you all may have. But thank you very much for the time and attention today, and happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Doozie. I think the webinar poll that we got, you addressed some of those, like shared beverages seems to be a great opportunity to connect. So that seems to be an overarching theme. Public meetings, invitations, whether it's from the group to the public land manager or vice versa. Stakeholder engagement seemed to be one which you seem very good at in your role. Some challenges that came up was turnover, and I suspect that's probably in both the public partnership entity as well as the private. Capacity of staff. I think we all know land managers have lots to do with little folks, and keeping people engaged, and then general knowledge of volunteers on specific projects, like how do you build a rock wall or something like that. Do you have any kind of tips to overcome some of those challenges?
How about one or two of those specifically? Whatever, which one should we kind of look into there?
I like the keeping people engaged, because I feel like that is a hard thing to do over time.
Yeah, so for us, a big part of that is providing a really good volunteer experience. And so we feel like you kind of alluded to it, having people leave projects with a literal and figurative good taste in their mouth, providing food, offering a social component to these projects. And a lot of those volunteers end up returning. However, what we've kind of ultimately decided is working with local businesses and social groups and companies provides sort of a team building opportunity. So we have and continue to develop and turn over rocks for new partnerships in our community, and it gives people again, we keep our projects to 4 hours or so it's not taking up whole days or whole days on weekends. We live in an area where a lot of people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make it work. It's a really expensive place to live, but the area does offer a lot. So really, from the volunteer satisfaction kind of standpoint, we go through a lot to thank our volunteers, to really appreciate what they've done, because frankly, we don't have an organization, we don't have jobs without it, and the amount of work, as I'm sure Jared and the other panelists can attest to, just vastly outweighs the resources that are available to the agency. So if we're able to put on 60 projects throughout the year, which up here is really short. I mean, our field season is basically mid-May through the end of September until the snow starts flying. And so we're able to get a lot accomplished. But what we can do with 15 people coming out in a 4-hour project compared to what a 3-person trail crew employed by the agency, it's significant. And so if we're able to do 2 or 3 of those projects a week, making hay while the sun shines in the summer months, we're able to contribute a lot to the district and to our community.
I have 2 really pointed questions for you that maybe you could answer. One is, what kind of insurance do you have to cover your volunteer-led hikes and ski outings?
Yep. So we've got liability insurance. We do have workman's comp insurance as well. So for and we just work with local brokers over here in Frisco. And so then we do have some people on volunteer agreements with the agency, and Jared provided some resources for you to look into those sorts of things. And on projects where we are working on the national forest, those people all sign waivers, and that basically makes them for that time covered by the government. So if somebody were to cut off a finger or something while on a project with our organization, but on the national forest, under that volunteer agreement, they are covered through workman's comp. That said, we have our own as well. All of our field staff go through wilderness first aid training. Any hike leaders have CPR training. We're very careful about cell coverage, safety protocols, those sorts of things. Just purchased our first AED that will be in our truck to hopefully never have to use. So yeah. And you have another one there?
Yep. The last question was, where could folks looking for this kind of similar partnership start looking for grant opportunities?
Grant opportunities. I should make mention that we are very fortunate to be a beneficiary of the Ski Conservation Fund. So if you go buy a day ticket at Keystone, Breckenridge, A Basin, Copper Mountain, you have to opt out of $1. And that money all goes into a fund. We submit a grant every year to which ends up being a significant contribution to our annual budget. Beyond that, there are programs you can pay for subscriptions. I would start grant opportunities with local businesses, local foundations, and then based on the kind of work that you are doing, we are in a ski industry, so we might go after ski and snowboard companies, outdoor companies, Patagonias, the REIs of the world. There are a lot of grant opportunities, but they are not going to come emailing you or knocking on your door to apply. So there is some research involved. Just start going around to companies you're familiar with, to foundations you're familiar with. Ask the agencies. It came as somewhat of a surprise to me how many federal agencies are also writing grants to get funding as well. So I'd be curious if some of the other panelists might have a better explanation on the grant opportunities than myself. But we work with some of the big companies that are big employers in our community, and oftentimes people recognize the importance of recreation, especially where we are, where it's pretty much entirely the reason people decide to come here and live and work. So a little bit of a fuzzy answer there, but there are opportunities out there. I would start locally, regionally, statewide, and then nationwide. Be really careful with the fine print before you go spending a bunch of time. Make sure that your project or program fits within their umbrella of what they're looking for. Nicole's worth of free advice.
Well, they're asking for it, so thank you for providing. And then other panelists, if you could throw in the chat, maybe if you have great links or sources to his question, if you guys have other great sources to share with attendees today. That leads us to our next polling question. Thanks, Doozie. That was really great information, and nice to see the flip side of the land management to someone who directly serves a public land. That was great. Our polling question number 3 is, what resources would be helpful in building and navigating these partnerships? The chat will have the link, and then I love QR codes, so I keep throwing them up here for you. Our next presenter is Nicole Foss, the Director of Operations and Development with Common Outdoor Ground out of Laramie, Colorado. And Nicole, if you want to go ahead and load your screen while folks are finishing up their polling, that would be great.
Can everybody see that okay? Are there any
Yes.
boxes or just anything?
It is in presenter mode, so, and it looks good. So
Amazing.
thank you.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, I just wanted to say it's so great to hear more about the Friends of the Dillion Ranger District. One of the rangers that we work with pretty commonly up here, Dan Mesenbrink, sings your praises all the time from his tenure down in Summit County. So we're a very similar organization, Common Outdoor Ground. Just kind of giving you the context, we're located in Laramie, Wyoming. We serve Albany County, Carbon County, and Laramie County. So basically those 3 counties down in the southeast corner of Wyoming. So let's see here. I just want to start with kind of like how we got started. We are far younger than the Friends of the Dillion Ranger District. We started in 2018. We were started by a USFS employee who was doing a master's program at the University of Wyoming. Concurrently with his job as a public affairs specialist. This is Aaron Voos, who is, I think, a public affairs specialist for the entire Medicine Bow Route National Forest and Thunder Basin grasslands, like the whole thing. So you may receive emails from him on a regular basis containing approved press releases. He's a great guy. You should call him up and chat with him if you ever are thinking of starting something like COG. He has a lot of good wisdom on that. But basically, we were started because there were a lot of people who were very involved on our outdoor spaces in outdoor recreation. They wanted to help with land stewardship, and they would go to the Laramie Ranger District office and say, hey, I want to get involved. How do I do that? And they would say, well, that's great. We have no capacity for that. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Like, you can pick up some trash. And so that, I think, was really frustrating for the employees there, is that they didn't have a system for dealing with that kind of that interest and that influx of people. Having done it now as my entire job, it does take some significant capacity. Also, my title is sort of misleading. I am the only employee of Common Outdoor Ground. It's me, just me. I have director in my title so that people don't ask to talk to my boss because I'm the only one who answers the emails. So yeah, I'm the volunteer coordinator. I am the grant writer. I am the secretary, the email answerer. Basically, whatever we do, I get paid to make it happen. We are a very community-focused organization, wanting to respond to the needs of the land managers around us. We have BLM land, state park, national forest, all within a 30-minute radius of Laramie. So we've got a variety of land managers, as well as Pilot Hill, which is, if you're not from Southeast Wyoming, Pilot Hill is sort of a unicorn. It's a community land trust situation where a bunch of different landowners have come together to agree to let that land be used as public outdoor recreation space. So we've got lots of different land managers in our immediate vicinity, and COG intentionally wants to work with all of them. I've got our mission up here, that we're a community organization providing volunteer support for the sustainability of outdoor spaces in Southeast Wyoming. And it's really broad, and that's on purpose. We work with city parks and rec. We work with state parks. We work with BLM, we work with Forest Service. Forest Service was obviously our initial partner and is still one of the most important partners we work with, but we are not, we're not limited to that partnership because the recreation opportunities around us are vast. So the thing that we always say about COG is that we want to be the thing in the middle that makes the gears come together and allows the machine to work. So we want to be the connector. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We want to try to make it happen with the people who have the desire and the people who have the resources, etc. So we are explicitly collaborative. Doozie gave me a great idea to kind of give you some of our stats from this last season. So I looked those up real quick. We had over 20 partnerships in 2024, which was amazing. And we were very happy to make that happen in our volunteer season, which up here is as well pretty short. We had 32 projects. We worked with 306 volunteers for about 1,800 volunteer hours. So that's over $57,000 that we donated to public land through our volunteer hours. And we are really jazzed about that number because it keeps increasing every year. So federal and state partners, I feel like that's what we're here to talk about. If you want to work with your local parks and rec department, it's a little bit easier. You know that there's an office, you can chat with them. So there are two types of partnerships with land managers that we largely engage in. There are formal partnerships and informal partnerships. Doozie gave a lot of great information on what it looks like to have what I assume is a fairly formalized partnership with the USFS, having an office in their office. But there are also other ways that we've gone about this that can be really successful for different types of projects depending on the outcomes. So we're going to talk about formal partnerships first. This is our ongoing relationship with the Forest Service. So we have what is called a challenge cost share agreement. This is an agreement that I believe is on a 5-year cycle. So we just renewed our agreement for the first time this last year. And we annually define the scope of work. So we have an annual operating plan that gets renegotiated every year. And that's where we sit down with the rangers and we say, what do you need? Like, what are the projects that are happening that you would like some volunteer assistance with? And we basically work together to line that out. Sometimes we've reopened campgrounds, or we've done trail work, or we have done different like fence building or barbed wire removal, or really whatever the folks in our district know that they need. It's a little bit tricky because we have to outline it about 4 to 5 months in advance of the volunteer season. So things can come up, but it is fairly flexible in that we can renegotiate the annual agreement kind of at any time if needs really change. Say there was a project that they thought that they were going to want to do, and then like a campground they wanted to reopen, but now they don't have the funding to maintain it if we do reopen it, but they could really use our help doing some maintenance on a campground that's already open, that's on the reservation system. We can kind of make those changes as we go, but generally the scope of work is pretty much what we're looking at for the summer. So our point of contact, this is a slight sore spot for me. Our incredible, amazing Jonathan Brooks, who was our main point of contact, the recreation supervisor for the Laramie district, has unfortunately been promoted and moved across the country. So we don't currently have a Jonathan or a recreation supervisor. And as some of you may know, the Forest Service isn't exactly jazzed about hiring people right now. So we're kind of in a weird limbo space. Luckily, Aaron still works for the Forest Service. So Aaron is great because he can be our primary contact and then direct us to whoever's individual area that project, question, whatever connects to. So that kind of helps have us have some stability and durability, right, in that turnover in the recreational staff, which are often pretty difficult positions. They are charged with vast mandates and given small budgets, so it's a tough job. We also try to only take on shovel-ready projects for our general cost share challenge agreement because we love our volunteers and many of them are very skilled, but we can never guarantee that we're going to have X number of people skilled in this particular way for this one project. And so things like planning, navigating a NEPA process, that's not really our jam. We kind of step back from that. So we also tell the public we have no regulatory authority. We take our projects from the Forest Service. We take guidance from the Forest Service. So if you have a project that you're really excited about, we would love to connect you with somebody at the Forest Service to talk about that project. We are approaching the whole situation with just a real enthusiasm for land stewardship and not necessarily a list of items that we want to get done. Though our contacts are very responsive when we bring topics that have been shared with us to them as representing their community's desires. So we also have other Forest Service partnerships. 2 are new this year, but I'm going to talk about the third first. So we were thrilled to be able to be involved in the reopening of the Centennial Visitor Center, which is at the entrance to Medicine Bow National Forest, past Centennial, Wyoming. So on Highway 130, going into the Snowies, there is a Forest Service building, which is a visitor center that had been intermittently staffed by volunteers and intermittently completely closed for years. So Visit Laramie, which is a nonprofit in Laramie dedicated to tourism and community revitalization, they approached us, or really they approached the Forest Service and they're like, we'd really like to see this visitor center open. And the Forest Service said, can we interest you in a challenge cost share agreement that is going to take approximately 7 months to initiate? And they said, no, thank you. It's March and we would like to see it open in May. So then they came to us and said, hey, we've heard that you already have a formalized agreement with the Forest Service. Is there any way we can get this going? So through COG's existing relationship with the Forest Service, we were able to add reopening the Centennial Visitor Center and staffing it for the season to our annual operating plan. So for the first year, it was through COG's agreement. Visit Laramie helped us with the hiring process, but the staff person at the visitor center worked for COG. After about a year serving probably over 8,000 visitors to the visitor center over the course of the season, which was phenomenal. And we were really excited about it. And there was a lot of excitement about it in the community. After that first year, we reconvened with Visit Laramie and the Forest Service. And at that time, they have decided to do a participating agreement with the Forest Service because at that point, they had some runway to be able to get into the bureaucratic paperwork of it all. So then we transitioned to the Centennial Visitor Center transitioned to being through a participating agreement with the Forest Service, which is under the Expanded Partnership Authority, and it's much more like a concessionaire agreement. So you use the Forest Service facilities and you're allowed to sell things there. You do some light maintenance on the facility, but it still belongs to the Forest Service. And there are interpretive response and educational commitments that you make if you're going to do a participating agreement. So that's kind of how that project looked. This is very COG in that we love it when a project grows beyond us and finds its, long-term seat in the community. We are not sad that it has flown out of the nest. We're really jazzed for them. So this year we took on 2 big new pieces from the Forest Service, campground decommissioning and cabin remodeling. So we have a second agreement with the Forest Service. I believe it is also a challenge cost share agreement that uses Great American Outdoor Act funds. And that is to decommission a list of, I think, 7 campgrounds over the next 3 years. I think it ends in 2026 or 2027. So that project has been a new type of thing for us. It involves board members using heavy equipment through our liability coverage that we have, much more specialized volunteers. it's been sort of a different arrangement. We also are doing some cabin remodeling at Little Brooklyn Lake Cabin. The, oh my goodness, Spruce Mountain Lookout Tower. There are a few that are sort of in Southeast Wyoming that we're going to be tackling. So the National Forest Foundation got a grant to do some work on Medicine Bow Route National Forest, Thunder Basin Grasslands over the entire section. And we are going to be funded through them, through an invited grant from NFF, in order to do some of these things. So our responsibility is obviously ultimately still to the Forest Service, and they will guide us through any decisions we need to make in cabin remodeling. But our reporting and our funding will be through the National Forest Foundation. So that's another way to kind of work through, like the visitor center worked through us, we're working through National Forest Foundation just because it makes the most sense. So coming back to the different types of partnerships, we also have informal partnerships. So we've worked with BLM, we've worked with state parks, and we're really focusing in those informal partnerships on accomplishing a discrete goal. So not necessarily coming in and saying like, we want to be a part of land stewardship in this next season, give us some projects. We're more saying we have a project, it's on BLM land, how can we work with you to get this done? So an example of that would be the cleanup that we did at Roger Canyon. We did 2 cleanups this summer. Roger Canyon is a BLM parcel that is very near Laramie. It is very popular with recreational shooters. For some reason, people seem to like to drag large pieces of trash out there and then shoot at them and then leave them. So it's a great spot for a cleanup. There's a lot of difference to be made there. So we worked through SWORC, which is the Southeast Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Collaborative. The BLM already came to SWORC, we came to SWORC. There was a Roger Canyon subcommittee where we were able to work with the BLM to plan these cleanups. COG planned, hosted, and provided liability coverage for the cleanups. BLM provided the trailer you see in the picture, and also was able to make those runs to the dump so that we could continue taking trash out all day. We removed about 6,000 pounds of trash from Roger Canyon this summer in just 2 cleanups. I'm pretty proud of that. The other concern that we had when we were planning this was that it is a spot that's popular with recreational shooters. And personally, I am not going to plan an event where volunteers will be cleaning up trash while recreational shooting is going on in their vicinity. So we worked with the BLM to have a law enforcement official out there. There's one LEO for our BLM district, and he drove all the way out here from Rollins to hang out while we were doing the cleanup. And we tried to publish a stop shooting order through the National Register. There are ways that you can make it so it's legally enforceable. That ended up being too much of a bureaucratic mess for us to do it. We did find that having Brent, the LEO, at the site, encouraging people to go elsewhere just during the duration of our event worked fine. But if we were worried about it, we might try to go through a more formalized process. So just overall overview, things that I would recommend if you're looking at working with a federal or state agency. Flexibility, like patience, flexibility, taking the long view, in it for the long haul. If you have a specific project or a specific outcome that you desire, be prepared for it to take a while. That's just the speed of things. That's just how it goes. Be ready for it. Also, we've had a lot of success collaborating with folks in our community who already have existing agreements with these agencies. So if you have an idea that you want to get off the ground soon and you don't have time to get through the entire process of writing up and entering into an agreement with an agency, consider that other people in your community might already have a structure where you can get that done. Also, I think you should get to know the public affairs specialist in your local agency. They can kind of help connect you to the different people. It's their job to be able to direct public inquiries to the right place. That can help have coffee with that, have coffee with, I mean, this is popular advice that we've seen today. Just get to know the people in your agency. Having those multiple connections and relationships will help you weather that turnover. And then even if a formalized agreement isn't the best fit for your situation, continue building those relationships. Have those routine information sharing sessions. If the work that you're doing involves public land, it is useful to be able to communicate that to the agency partners in your area. And then this is something Doozie talked about. Yeah, have a diversified funding structure. In our agreement with the Forest Service, our last cost share agreement, we were billing them for like $14,000 a year. This year, our cost share agreement is at about $3,000. So just don't put all your eggs in one basket. And know that land managers often cannot provide the funding to do the outdoor recreation projects that people in the community are excited about. It's just not always feasible. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I think you addressed a lot of what the questions that came in, which was funding. So if you have any tips, that would be great to throw in the chat. I'm going to replace your sharing here, and we'll move on to the final polling question, which is information for Haley and I, which is how can universities and Extension assist with these partnerships? That's something we're very curious about in this webinar. And as you guys are either using the QR code or the link that's in the chat, I am going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter, who is Chuck Sullivan, and he is the executive director with the Wright down here in Colorado. Chuck, take it away.
I do that all the time. First of all, thanks for having me, and to all the previous speakers. That was incredibly educational and informational, and I've got big shoes to fill here for a few minutes. But to everybody here, I do not have a presentation, and the photo that one of yours showed said, and Harriet, that's my niece, my sister's new puppy. So that's that's who that was. Anyway, so this is the hot coffee or cold beer part of the program today. This is the sit down, have a conversation, and you know, it wasn't out of, oh shit, I don't have time to do a slide presentation. It was after our kind of pre-meeting yesterday. What I think is essential to communicate from my end is the importance of sitting down, having that cup of coffee, looking people in the eyes, and sitting across the table and having a conversation. The organization that I started and I'm the executive director of is called the Wright, and Wright comes from that root meaning of the word. So maker, builder, think shipwright or wheelwright. And we describe our mission as building prosperity in Colorado communities by deepening our connection to place. And that work really takes on a number of different renditions. But at the end of the day, it's about sharing lived experiences and stories and developing non-traditional partnerships. You know, our work started just as a little bit of background in 2010 when we had the chance to approach then Governor Ritter in Colorado and say, it's when the SI Snow Show and then the OR show was all coming to Colorado, and it was before there was an OREC office. And we said to the governor's office and his head of economic development for the state that this outdoor sector, outdoor recreation, has, it punches above its weight. It has a much wider impact than what can be measured necessarily. And we created a campaign, really, and the first iteration of the Wright was called Something Independent. And we hosted all sorts of community building events and really celebrated sort of outdoor sector, initially entrepreneurs. And pretty quickly we realized that, in building this community and celebrating the sort of the outdoor recreation side of things, this is 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, that particularly as you get into the smaller rural communities and that are in transition, you can't separate those folks and those businesses from brewers, from distillers, from farmers, from ranchers. It's placemakers and it's community builders at the end of the day. We then went about, the OREC office was established, Something Independent was recognized as being somewhat of a forerunner to that. And with that office, which we still partner with, I was able to kind of transition the work that we do into a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and really with that mission around building prosperity through deepening our connection to place. And I guess what I wanted to kind of talk about and share today, it might be helpful just to talk about two little areas of just context. And one is as much as we would like to tune it out, we are all navigating in our own ways this overarching noise of division and polarization, right? And honestly, in my experience, when you get down to the community level, the actual narrative is a story of communities coming together to solve for the challenges of the day. And I think that those stories and those narratives deserve more airtime. So finding ways and opportunities for that, to bring that forward. And then second, I think, I know here in Colorado, but I would imagine very much so in Wyoming as well. And many of the other locations where people are tuning in from, is that a lot of this work that we're talking about here is taking place in regions and communities experiencing transition. And the transition it's economic, of course, and the kind of the wave of extraction here in the West and the introduction of outdoor recreation industry, the challenges that agriculture, and legacy industries are facing. And, outdoor recreation can sometimes the cute new boy or girl in school, right? But culturally, it's not always just the easy kind of transition, right? In fact, we hosted a whole 2-year series of, it was on the road tour, and we called them Campfire Conversations, really a listening session. We hosted these in the Yampa Valley, the Arkansas Valley, the Grand Valley, and the San Luis Valley. And we held an evening of community conversations where we sat and had public conversations with no whiteboards and no stakeholder groups. And we had agricultural representation. We had outfitters and hunting and on the west side of the Yampa Valley. But we made darn sure that when we were hosting programs in Steamboat and we were hosting programs in Craig, we were talking about both of those programs being hosted in the Yampa Valley. not necessarily Routt County or Moffat County, which are, you know, one's distinctly blue, one's distinctly red. And, you know, but when we get in the room and have talks, you know, the kind of questions that we're asking are, you know, take last year in the San Luis Valley, for example, we went to town of San Luis, the city of Monte Vista, and the town of Saguache. And, you know, one of the greatest questions that I would ask if I was moderating, and we had different moderators and stuff, was often, hey, look, you've only been here, you know, a new arrival in the San Luis Valley, you've only been here, what, 30 years now? And was there a point on that trajectory that you can look back on and think that's when you knew you would call this place home? And in that, we just saw barriers break down. You know, we had a conversation in Saguache with a 75-year-old, 6'4" builder and rancher and a 14-year-old Hispano artist. And the rancher who is retired has taken up painting, and he's incredibly talented. And just talking about the inspiration in their art that they both draw from the land and the landscape. And we see people's different connections to place. Often in, you know, the outdoor recreation industry, people, I think that language can even be polarizing in and of itself. In a lot of communities, it can sort of say skiing, fly fishing, stand-up paddleboarding, and in a lot of the places and a lot of people we talk to, somebody's greatest day or weekend outdoors in the summer may have been their cousin's quinceanera, and their grandmother taking them to Walmart to get a fishing pole and wanting to do it every day for the rest of the summer. And so, you know, we've invested in these conversations, and you know, there is really kind of you know, I kind of wanted to set the context and then kind of highlight these three things that I think about in our work. And one is meeting people where they are. Two is listening. And the third thing is trust. And the work of the previous two things, all the work that everyone doing here is laddering up to building an underlying trust. And you know, it was mentioned here by Jared, and everyone is, God, make time for that coffee, right? You know, I think about, you know, some other hows to like meet people where they are, show up, go to someone else's event or meeting for no reason. Go to listen, you know, just go to, we've all been there on our own end of like, geez, is anybody going to show up tonight? Right. And there's been nights where you're like, shit, not many people showed up. So, you know, just show up. You might learn something. You might meet someone new. You might get a free beer or a hot cup of coffee and maybe some snacks, you know, and, you know, so that's something, but it really, I think it's essential to show up and to meet people where they are and look for those opportunities. The other thing, when I talk about listening, you know, this is a quote from somewhat of a new agey poet, writer, gentleman by the name of Mark Nepo, who, on the topic of listening, his comment or his quote is, listening is the willingness to lean in and be willing to be changed by what we hear. And I have to remind myself that all the time. You know, I think about the context of community meetings and all that stuff. And so often There's just a difference between hearing and listening, and to show up to a meeting knowing exactly what you want to say and who you want to hear it. And you've listened, you've waited for your turn, and then you're like, okay, great, thanks. So what I came here to communicate today, but we didn't open ourselves up to that willingness to potentially be changed by what we hear. So, that is something that I think is really, really critical. And, back to these sort of conversation, the campfire conversations we did, I just wanted to kind of share one example of, challenge for me and talk about funding and the Wright and stuff. So much of this work that I do it's not really quantifiable in any sort of near term context, but it was the Chaffee County Community Foundation, and they underwrote one of the the public conversations and a lunch, and we had 4-H director there and the Forest Service there, and we had stand-up paddleboard companies there, we had teachers, we had the superintendent of schools, and anyways, housing's a huge issue in the upper Arkansas Valley, and I saw but we asked everyone those questions about what brought you here, when did you know you'd call this place home? And so Guinevere, I will wrap this up. And then but I saw her 6 months later, and she said, she's like, I look back, and that was the most productive and valuable conversation we had around housing in the Valley all last year. And I said, well, I don't recall us talking about housing. And she said, exactly. So on that note, I will wrap it up. And I think all those things ladder up to that end goal of really building foundational trust.
Thanks. It's always great to hear you talk about sense of place and what that means to people and how that really ties everybody together. So thank you for that. With the time that we have left, we have a few questions, and this first one I would like to ask for anybody on the panel to answer. If you could keep them like to a minute or something, the answers. A lot of questions came in about balancing conservation, economy, and the social aspect, right? Like we all see communities that are struggling with this, as Chuck mentioned, they're transitioning away from something to this economy. How do you balance all of those things in your day-to-day work and in your goal setting? Hey, Jared, you want to take this?
I can try. I had a computer shutdown meltdown in our conference room, so hopefully I'm back and still have sound and everything. I think the key there, particularly on the social end of that, from a land manager perspective, is, and I really like what Chuck said in terms of listening and being willing to have your mind changed. I think as managers, our barometer for pace, scale of recreation development and marketing is our community. And so we constantly have to be checking in with our community to ensure that pace and scale of our recreation development there's a comfort with that, and that the quality of life outcomes that they seek are being thought about as we move forward with these developments. And so it's great to talk about trail development, but if people can't afford to live in the community, there's bigger issues that the community wants addressed that may not be solvable by us as land management agencies, but also maybe need to take the priority of the community over developing a trailhead or maintaining a BLM facility. So I guess the high point of that is constantly using the community as a barometer to ensure that social sustainability and that the pace and scale is is comfortable to a wide variety of people that choose to call that place home.
Thank you, Chuck, or Jared. Appreciate that. Chuck, were you gonna say something before I interrupted you? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, unless I have anybody else who wants to chime in on that one. We have another question. This one came in on our registration, and it says, are you considering or reconsidering partnerships with outdoor affinity groups? And how are you rethinking these strategies? Just so you know, an affinity group is a shared identity amongst people, and they have an outdoor interest.
I mean, for COG, we definitely work with outdoor affinity groups. For the Roger Canyon cleanup, we worked with Southeast Wyoming Climber Coalition, and I think that they're great partners because they have a vested interest in the land and a stake in maintaining that land and helping us further our overall mission, which is to develop that culture of land stewardship and the feeling of shared responsibility.
We will engage in pretty much any partnership where there is interest, basically. And as we've heard, Chuck very eloquently put, I mean, just start it with a cup of coffee, relationship building, and you know what? It doesn't end in a partnership every time, but that's okay, and sometimes those paths can take you other directions, but what is our most valuable resource? It is our time. And so anybody that is willing to give up their time without financial gains, we take very seriously and want to do whatever we can to try and link their interest with the agency in whatever way makes sense for everybody involved. We're not looking to do projects just to do projects. So we want to keep things aligned with the needs of the agency, but I think it's a big deal if somebody is willing to give up their time to benefit their community or their public lands. We take it very seriously and do whatever we can to facilitate that.
Great contribution. And I like that you said, not always is it a partnership, because sometimes it doesn't fit. So doesn't mean it's a failure. The next one is, can you talk about opportunities for landowners, especially farmers and ranchers, to benefit from trends in outdoor recreation?
The thing that comes to mind for me just in my personal life is doing things like getting a portion of your land on hip camp or something like that to kind of provide a space for outdoor recreationalists to engage with your land. I know that agritourism is a big thing, and I think that the populations who love outdoor recreation are probably it's a Venn diagram that might just be a circle with the agritourism folks. So that would be my initial thought.
And I'll add to that, we had a lot of this intersection of agriculture and outdoor rec as part of our Campfire Conversation series. And up in Northwest Colorado, where, Steamboat is on kind of one end of the valley and Craig and Northwest Colorado on the other, we had a couple ranchers who were talking about cyclists. They're like, I was out there working and there was a couple bikers that rode by and just waved, flagged them down. They asked us about our ranch. We told them about the family history and, and they invited everybody in the audience. Like, if you're ever out our way, feel free to pop in. And so that's from the informal, but to double down on Nicole's comment, at least here in Colorado, I see a lot of regional investment in the agritourism conversations, and from county economic development or regional economic development folks. And then I would also sort of, at the same time, we're seeing, I think, a lot of discussions around the creative arts and outdoor recreation. And I see sometimes those groups are meeting here, here, and here. So that might be an example to, maybe I'll go to that other group's discussion just to see what they're talking about and maybe meet a few people.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. And I think, some of these questions that were submitted, we'll try to get some answers from the panelists and send those out to you. But I would really, this one came in specific to Wyoming, but if you guys could talk to both Colorado and Wyoming with your knowledge, I would ask, how can we better support rural communities to sustainably grow their outdoor recreation economies?
I think one big element of that is really making sure that you are addressing needs within the community. So speaking with the land managers themselves, if we're talking about the public lands surrounding these rural areas, what are the issues? What are the what are the needs of the area? And then trying to address those needs. I've done some consultations around the country to try and get groups like this up and running. And what I try and make very clear is what we do and what works in our community will be different from what you need and what. So really understanding your own community, the interests and the needs of those community members, and then as best you can align those with the needs and resources of the Public Lands Agency.
Listening.
We had a presentation by the state demographer, and she said, if you know one county, you know one county. And I think sometimes everybody's looking for the magic bullet, but I think you guys tied it up very nicely. Like, you gotta listen, you gotta participate and engage your community. So thank you guys so much for participating today on our panel. It was such a great conversation. So thank you for leading that, and really thank you to our attendees. We really appreciate you tuning in over your lunch hour. I know sometimes it's hard to give up food, but we did learn that beverages are an important part. Sharing food, fellowship, developing that is a really great tool, and listening. So hopefully we can you guys can take that with you, and feel free to reach out to myself or Haley. We have some contacts here for you guys if you have questions. We are also going to have this on the website that Haley shared a link to, so you guys can listen to the recording again, and we'll look over any questions that came in and try to get some input from the speakers. Any final thoughts from anyone or questions before we close out the day?
Weber, if you'd be so kind, please share my contact information at the very least. I'd love to have conversations with other people. I'm sure there are dozens of people on the call that that could also present just as well. So something to be learned from everybody. So please use me as a resource if I can help in any way.
Same
Great.
here.
Yes.
You guys want to
Likewise.
just, sorry, do you guys want to throw your emails in the chat? I have all of them, or collectively Haley and I do, but maybe just for people, and we'll see what we can add to our follow-up email after this webinar. And certainly we can put your emails in the chat, or whatever information we send out later. So again, thank you guys for everyone's time. We really appreciate it. This is learning for Haley and I, and thank you for letting us be part of the conversation. Hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.